In the glittering ballroom of the city's most prestigious hotel, champagne flowed freely as guests and designer suits and evening gowns mingled under crystal chandeliers. This annual charity gala had always been the highlight of the social calendar, but tonight would be remembered for something far more significant than its fundraising total. James Richardson, a brilliant young architect whose designs had recently transformed the city's skyline, stood near the dessert table, engaged in a conversation about his latest sustainable building project. His tailored navy suit and quiet confidence reflected his rising status in the industry. Yet in mere moments, his professional accomplishments would fade into the background, overshadowed by an incident that would expose the uncomfortable truths still lurking beneath society's polished surface. As he reached for a chocolate-dipped strawberry, a shrill voice cut through the ambient chatter. "My necklace! Someone's stolen my necklace!" The accusation came from Sarah Anderson, a prominent society figure known for her extravagant jewelry collection and her position on multiple charity boards. Her finger pointed directly at James, her face contorted with an unfounded certainty that made the room grow still. The weight of 300 pairs of eyes fell upon James. The string quartet stopped playing mid-note. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wind through tall grass. In that moment, James felt his carefully constructed world begin to tilt on its axis. Here he was, a man who had earned every accolade through talent and determination, reduced to a stereotype by someone who knew nothing about him except the color of his skin. But James didn't get to where he was by backing down from challenges. As he opened his mouth to defend himself, an unexpected ally emerged from the crowd. A witness to the true series of events was about to turn this accusation on its head, armed with evidence that would not only clear James's name but force everyone in that ballroom to confront their own hidden biases. The security cameras had been rolling all evening, and what they captured would leave the guests speechless. As the truth began to unfold, it became clear that this wasn't just about a missing necklace. It was about power, privilege, and the assumptions that continued to divide us. What happened next would not only change the course of the evening, but would become a viral moment that sparked conversations across the nation. Sometimes it takes a single incident to hold up a mirror to society. This is the story of one such night, where an unjust accusation set off a chain of events that would leave no one in that ballroom unchanged. As the security footage began to play on the giant screens normally reserved for displaying donor names, the true story was about to emerge, and it was far more shocking than anyone could have anticipated. The guests who had been so quick to form judgments minutes ago now held their breath in anticipation. James stood tall, his dignity intact, as the first frames of the security footage began to play. But before the truth could fully come to light, another twist would throw everything into question, one that would force everyone present to confront uncomfortable truths about themselves and the world they thought they knew so well. What happened next would not only vindicate James, but would also start a movement that would ripple through social media and news channels for weeks to come. This is a story about justice, redemption, and the power of truth to shine through even the darkest prejudices. But most importantly, it's a story about how a single moment can become the catalyst for real change, if we're brave enough to face the truth it reveals. The security footage began playing in reverse, rewinding through the evening's events. On screen, the elegant crowd watched as Sarah Anderson herself placed her diamond necklace in her clutch just 30 minutes before her accusation. She had done so while checking her makeup in the powder room mirror, a moment captured in perfect clarity by the hotel's high-definition cameras. But rather than bringing immediate resolution, this revelation only deepened the mystery of what was really unfolding in that ballroom. As the footage continued to play, showing Sarah returning to the main hall with her clutch firmly in hand, an older gentleman in the crowd stepped forward. David Chen, a retired judge known for his unwavering integrity, had been observing the entire scene with growing concern. "Mrs. Anderson," he spoke with measured words, "I saw you place that very necklace in your handbag not long ago. Perhaps we should all take a moment to consider what's really happening here." The whispers in the crowd took on a different tone. James remained silent, his expression composed despite the turbulent emotions beneath the surface. This wasn't the first time he had faced prejudice, but it was certainly the most public. As the founder of one of the city's leading architectural firms, He had broken through countless barriers, yet moments like these served as stark reminders of how much work remained to be done. A young reporter who had been covering the gala for the local newspaper was frantically taking notes. She knew she was witnessing something far more newsworthy than the typical charity event story she'd expected to write. The tension in the room was palpable, a complex web of social dynamics and unconscious biases being exposed in real time. Sarah's face had lost its accusatory confidence, replaced by a flush of embarrassment, or was it something else? The security footage revealed more than just the necklace incident. It showed her having an intense conversation with someone just minutes before her accusation, someone whose face was just out of frame. The plot was thickening, and it seemed there might be more to this story than a simple misunderstanding or prejudiced assumption. Meanwhile, James's colleague, Dr. Patricia Rodriguez, a renowned civil rights attorney who had been his mentor since his early career days, made her way through the crowd. She had witnessed similar incidents throughout her career and recognized this moment for what it truly was, an opportunity for change. But before she could reach James, another piece of evidence emerged that would add yet another layer to this unfolding drama. The hotel's event coordinator approached with additional security footage, this time from the entrance cameras. It showed an unexpected interaction between Sarah and an unknown figure just before the gala began. The body language suggested tension, perhaps even threats. Could Sarah's accusation have been motivated by something, or someone, else entirely? As the crowd watched transfixed, the story began to take on dimensions no one had anticipated. This wasn't just about a false accusation or a missing necklace anymore. It was about power, manipulation, and the complex web of relationships that defined their social circle. Someone in that very room had orchestrated this moment, using deep-seated prejudices as a smokescreen for something far more calculated. The security team was now reviewing footage from all hotel cameras, and what they were discovering suggested a carefully planned scheme months in the making. James, who had initially been cast as the villain of the evening, was actually a pawn in someone else's game. But who was pulling the strings, and to what end? The answer to that question would shock everyone present, but for now, the truth remained tantalizingly out of reach. As the hotel's security team huddled around their monitors, a sudden gasp from one of the technicians drew everyone's attention. They had discovered something in the footage from the past week. Sarah Anderson had visited the hotel multiple times, always meeting with the same mysterious figure in the lobby. But what truly sent shockwaves through the room was the document visible in her hands during one of these meetings, blueprints that looked remarkably similar to James's latest architectural designs. The pieces were starting to fall into place. James's revolutionary sustainable building project, set to break ground next month, had been making headlines for its innovative approach to urban development. The contract was worth millions, and not everyone was happy about a newcomer disrupting the industry's status quo. The false accusation wasn't just about prejudice, it was about sabotage. Dr. Rodriguez stepped forward, her years of legal experience giving weight to her words. "This was never about a necklace," she announced, her voice carrying across the now silent ballroom. "Someone tried to use our society's worst instincts to destroy a man's reputation, but they didn't count on all of us being here to witness it." As she spoke, several other guests began to recall strange conversations and unusual incidents from recent weeks, adding their pieces to the puzzle. The security footage continued to reveal its secrets. In one frame, caught just hours before the gala, Sarah could be seen receiving an envelope from someone whose face was obscured by a fedora. The body language was tense, suggesting coercion rather than cooperation. Sarah's hands were shaking as she accepted whatever was inside. Suddenly, her earlier accusation took on a different light. Was she a villain or another victim? James stood in the center of it all, his architectural expertise now offering unexpected insight. "Those blueprints," he said, pointing to the security footage, "they're not just copies of my designs. They're modified versions that would compromise the building's structural integrity. Someone was planning to substitute them after." His voice trailed off as the full scope of the plot became clear. The crowd's attention shifted to the ballroom's entrance as two plainclothes detectives quietly slipped in, having been summoned by the hotel's security team. They had been investigating a series of corporate espionage cases in the city's construction industry, and this situation was quickly connecting dots they'd been trying to link for months. The tension in the room reached a fever pitch as one of the detectives received a phone call. His expression changed as he listened, and he quickly motioned to his partner. They began moving through the crowd with purpose, heading toward a specific corner of the ballroom where a figure had been quietly observing the entire scene unfold. Just then, the lights in the ballroom flickered once, twice, and went out completely. The backup generators kicked in seconds later, but in those moments of darkness, there was movement, a commotion, and a door slamming. When the lights returned, revealing what had happened in those crucial seconds, everyone in the room realized they were witnessing the culmination of a plot far more intricate than anyone had imagined. There, in the center of the ballroom, lay Sarah's clutch, fallen open, with not just her necklace spilling out, but a stack of documents that would blow the entire conspiracy wide open. And caught in the security camera's unblinking eye, a figure was fleeing through the service entrance, someone whose identity would shock everyone present, someone whose desperate escape attempt was about to trigger a chain of events that would change everything. The scattered documents revealed a shocking truth. This wasn't just about one building project. The papers contained evidence of a massive scheme involving multiple construction projects across the city, each one deliberately compromised to fail safety inspections after completion. The goal wasn't just to discredit James. It was to manipulate the entire market, forcing desperate developers to turn to a single construction company for emergency repairs. But the real bombshell came when Detective Morrison picked up a familiar business card from among the scattered papers. It belonged to Thomas Wellington, the city's building safety commissioner, the very man who had approved every project in question. The same man who, until moments ago, had been standing in the corner of the ballroom, watching everything unfold. The same man who had just fled through the service entrance. Sarah Anderson's hands trembled as she finally spoke up. "He threatened my daughter's career," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "She's a junior architect at his brother's firm. They said they would destroy her future if I didn't help them discredit James tonight. But I never knew about the building plans. I never knew they were putting people's lives at risk." James listened intently, his expression shifting from shock to determination. The latest building scheduled for inspection was a children's hospital wing he had designed, set to open in just 3 weeks. The realization that someone had planned to compromise its safety struck him to his core. This wasn't just about his reputation anymore. Lives were literally at stake. Dr. Rodriguez was already on her phone, coordinating with her legal team to secure emergency inspection orders for all the buildings in question. The reporters present were carefully documenting everything, knowing this story had evolved far beyond a simple society page scandal. This was about corruption at the highest levels of city government, about lives being put at risk for profit. Suddenly, one of the hotel's security guards burst into the ballroom. "Commissioner Wellington isn't alone," he reported breathlessly. "There's a private helicopter landing on the roof. Security cameras show 3 men in suits heading up there right now. They're carrying briefcases, the same ones visible in the footage from last week's meetings." The detective's radio crackled to life with urgent chatter. Multiple officers were already surrounding the building, but they couldn't legally access the roof without probable cause. Time was running out. If Wellington and his conspirators escaped with those briefcases, crucial evidence would be lost forever. In that moment, James stepped forward. "The maintenance access to the roof," he said, pulling up his building plans on his phone. "I designed the renovations for this hotel last year. There's another way up, one they don't know about." His intimate knowledge of the building's architecture might be their only chance to prevent the conspirators' escape. As James and the detectives rushed toward the hidden access point, the rest of the gala attendees watched the drama unfold on the security cameras now displayed on the ballroom screens. But what none of them realized was that the biggest shock of the evening was yet to come. Because in one of those briefcases wasn't just evidence of corruption. It contained information that would implicate some of the city's most prominent figures, including people standing in that very room. The camera footage showed Wellington and his associates now positioned on the roof, the helicopter's blades starting to spin. They thought they had orchestrated the perfect escape. But they hadn't counted on one crucial detail, a detail that James, with his architect's eye, had spotted in the blueprints. A detail that was about to turn their seemingly perfect plan into their ultimate undoing. Through the maintenance access, James led the detectives up a narrow service corridor, their footsteps echoing against metal stairs. As they emerged onto a hidden section of the roof, the helicopter's rotor wash whipped around them. Wellington and his associates were just 20 feet away, but they hadn't spotted them yet. They were too focused on their escape, shouting over the deafening roar of the engines. James pointed to a control panel partially hidden behind a ventilation unit. This was what he'd spotted in the blueprints, the building's emergency protocols that he'd integrated into his renovation design. With a nod from Detective Morrison, James pulled the lever. Instantly, the rooftop's emergency containment system activated, and retractable barriers rose from the edges of the helipad, making takeoff impossible. The look of shock on Wellington's face quickly turned to rage as he realized they were trapped. But when he reached into his jacket, it wasn't a weapon he pulled out. It was a phone. With a smirk, he held up the device, his thumb hovering over the screen. One click, he shouted over the helicopter noise, and every compromised building plan automatically uploads to the city's construction database, replacing the originals. You'll never prove which buildings were tampered with. But his triumphant moment was short-lived. From behind the helicopter emerged Sarah Anderson, clutching her phone, live streaming everything. She'd taken the executive elevator, another route she knew from years of attending events at the hotel. "I've been recording since you reached the roof," she announced, her voice steady despite her fear, "including your confession just now." As police officers flooded the rooftop, the true extent of the conspiracy began to unravel. The briefcases didn't just contain building plans, they held offshore account records, blackmail evidence, and a list of every official Wellington had bribed or threatened over the past decade. But the biggest revelation came from an unexpected source. One of Wellington's associates, facing arrest, decided to save himself. He revealed that the entire scheme went beyond just construction fraud. They had been using the compromised buildings as leverage to manipulate city development plans, forcing out small businesses and longtime residents from historic neighborhoods, all to benefit a select group of powerful developers. Back in the ballroom, as guests watched the arrests on the security feeds, Dr. Rodriguez made another discovery in the scattered papers. Hidden in the documents was evidence that cleared dozens of other professionals who, like James, had been previously discredited or forced out of their positions through similar schemes. The conspiracy had been targeting successful minorities in the industry for years, using social prejudices as a weapon to maintain their control. James's false accusation tonight hadn't been the end game. It was supposed to be just another brick in their wall of corruption. Instead, it became the crack that brought the whole structure tumbling down. As the handcuffed conspirators were led through the ballroom toward waiting police cars, the guests who had initially been so quick to judge James now watched in respectful silence. But the night held one final surprise. As the police began clearing the scene, a young officer approached James with a curious look. "Sir," she said, "there's something else you should see." She handed him a tablet showing footage from a different angle of the hotel's entrance. There, barely visible in the background of Wellington's earlier meetings, was a figure James recognized, his own mentor from architecture school, the man who had mysteriously discouraged him from taking certain high-profile projects over the years, the very person who had recommended he attend tonight's gala. The revelation hit him like a physical blow. Sometimes the people closest to you can be keeping you safe, and sometimes they can be part of the conspiracy. As James looked around the ballroom at the remaining guests, he realized that tonight's events hadn't just exposed one corrupt scheme, they had revealed how prejudice, power, and privilege could weave a web so intricate that even those caught in it might not recognize their own role. In the days following the gala, the city buzzed with revelations. James's architectural firm led a comprehensive review of all potentially compromised buildings, working alongside a task force of independent inspectors. To everyone's relief, most of the structures were found to be safe. Wellington's team hadn't managed to implement their modified plans yet. The few buildings that did show signs of tampering were quickly identified and scheduled for proper repairs. Sarah Anderson held a press conference, not to defend herself, but to publicly acknowledge her role in perpetuating harmful prejudices. She announced the creation of a new scholarship foundation, funded by her family's fortune, dedicated to supporting minority professionals in architecture and construction. It wasn't just about making amends. It was about creating lasting change in an industry that had been shadowed by discrimination for too long. The investigation into James's former mentor revealed a complex truth. The man had actually been gathering evidence against Wellington's organization for years, steering James away from certain projects to protect him from becoming a target too soon. But in his attempt to shield his protégé, he had inadvertently become another kind of gatekeeper, making decisions about James's career without his knowledge or consent. Dr. Rodriguez turned the case into a landmark legal victory, using it to challenge systemic barriers in the construction industry. The evidence uncovered at the Gala led to a series of reforms in the city's building inspection processes, including independent oversight committees and anonymous reporting systems for industry professionals who suspect corruption. The young reporter who witnessed everything that night wrote a powerful series of articles that won her a prestigious journalism award. But more importantly, her reporting sparked conversations across the country about how prejudice can be weaponized by those in power, and how quick judgments based on bias can serve as smokescreens for deeper corruption. Back at the hotel, the management invited James to lead the design team for their next renovation project. This time, when he stood in the ballroom presenting his plans, every person in the room listened with respect earned not just through his talent, but through his dignity in the face of injustice. The Children's Hospital wing opened on schedule, its safety verified by multiple independent inspectors. James added a small design element to the building, a window arrangement that, when caught by the morning sun, created patterns of light in the shape of interconnected circles. It served as a subtle reminder that our actions, like ripples in water, affect the entire community. 1 year later, at the next annual gala, the ballroom looked quite different. The guest list was more diverse, the conversations more genuine. The event honored local leaders who had worked to create positive change in the wake of last year's revelations. James was among them, but he shared his moment of recognition with others who had faced similar barriers throughout their careers. As he stood at the same dessert table where everything had begun a year ago, James reflected on how a single moment of injustice had exposed a deeper truth, that real change doesn't come from just proving innocent in the face of prejudice, but from dismantling the systems that allow such prejudices to be exploited in the first place. The security cameras still watched over the ballroom, but now they seemed less like silent witnesses and more like reminders of the transparency that had been hard-won that night. As James raised his glass to toast the year's achievements, he caught sight of his reflection in the window. Behind him, the city skyline sparkled with lights from buildings he had helped make safer, stronger, and more accessible to all. Sometimes, he realized, the most powerful response to prejudice isn't just proving it wrong. It's using that moment to build something better for everyone.